Oakland, California. A Thursday morning. The motorcycle shop on East 14th Street had been open since 1968. Nobody walking in that day knew it had a direct line to the worst afternoon in rock and roll history. A retired Hell's Angel was about to say 6 words to a stranger fixing his bike. He had no idea Mick Jagger was standing close enough to hear every one of them. The shop smelled like it always did. Motor oil, hot metal, burnt rubber. A radio in the corner played classic rock at low volume, the kind of station that never changed its playlist. Chrome parts hung from pegboards along the walls. A faded American flag decal peeled off the front window, half gone from 40 years of sun. Big Sal ran the place now. 71 years old, gray ponytail, 4 arms like cable wire. He'd patched in with the Angels back in 1967. Most people who walked through his door didn't know that. They just knew he fixed bikes right and didn't overcharge. 8:40 a.m. The shop hadn't opened yet, but the door was already unlocked for deliveries. A man stepped in wearing a faded denim jacket, baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses off for once because the morning light hadn't hit the windows yet. He had an old Triumph he'd been riding for years, something wrong with the clutch. He'd called ahead under a name that wasn't his. He gave the front desk kid a fake name. Mike, he said. Simple, forgettable. The kid barely looked up from his phone. Big Sal came out from the back, wiping his hands on a rag that hadn't been clean in a decade. He looked at the bike first, the way mechanics always do, longer than they look at the person who owns it. Clutch is slipping, Mick said. Voice low, easy, no performance in it. Sal crouched down, ran a hand along the engine casing. Yeah, I can hear it. Give me a few hours. Mick nodded, sat down on a stool near the counter, the kind of stool that had been there since the Carter administration. He picked up a motorcycle magazine from a stack, didn't really read it, just needed something for his hands to do. 9:15 a.m. The bell on the shop door rang again. A younger man walked in, mid-30s maybe, leather vest with patches that meant something to people who knew what they meant. He had a part in his hand, something he needed machined. He nodded at Sal, then noticed the older man at the counter. This Mike's bike? The younger man asked Sal, pointing his chin at the Triumph up on the lift. Sal grunted. Yeah. The younger man, Dutch, leaned against the counter waiting his turn. He had nothing better to do, so he started talking the way men do in shops like this one, filling silence because silence makes some people nervous. You hear they're doing another one of those Woodstock documentaries? Dutch said to Sal, every few years some kid with a film degree wants to relitigate the 60s. Sal didn't answer. He was already half under the bike. Dutch kept going anyway. They never get it right. Always make us out to be the villains, like we showed up looking for trouble. Mick's hand stopped on the page of the magazine. He didn't look up. He'd learned a long time ago that looking up too fast was how people got recognized. You talking about Altamont? Sal said from under the bike, voice muffled. Yeah, Altamont. Dutch said it the way some men say a word they've said too many times to feel anything from it anymore, and too many times to ever stop saying it either. My uncle was there, worked security that day. 40 years he carried that. Sal slid out from under the bike, sat up on his rolling stool, wiped his hands again. His face had changed, something old moving across it. I was there too, Sal said. Dutch blinked. You never told me that. Wasn't something I told people. Sal looked at the floor for a second, then back up. Stones hired us for beer. Beer, Dutch. Paid us in beer to control 300,000 people with a stage 4 feet off the ground and no real barrier. Dutch shook his head slow. And then when it went bad, who took the blame? Us. 40 years of being the villain in every documentary, every magazine piece, every college kid's term paper. Meanwhile, the band flew out on a helicopter before the blood even dried. If you were asked to provide security for a crowd of 300,000 people with no training and no real plan, who do you think should carry the blame when it goes wrong? Let me know what you think in the comments. Mick's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the magazine, but he wasn't reading anymore. He was 26 years old again, standing on a stage that felt like a trap the moment he stepped onto it. "You owe us, Jagger," Dutch said, not to Mick, just saying it into the room the way you'd say a line you'd rehearsed 1,000 times in your head and never gotten to say to the person it was meant for. "That's what my uncle always said. Whole club owes him a debt he never collected. Band built a whole legend on that festival and let us eat the blame for it." Sal's eyes drifted toward the man at the counter. Something in the set of those shoulders, something in the stillness of those hands. 10 a.m. The shop had filled with the ordinary sounds of a Thursday. A compressor kicking on, metal against metal somewhere in the back. Dutch had moved on to a different complaint about a different decade, but the air in the room hadn't fully cleared. Mick set the magazine down, stood up slow, the way a man stands up when his knees have, opinions about it now. He walked toward the counter where Dutch was leaning, close enough that Sal's eyes went sharp. "What did your uncle's name?" Mick asked. Dutch frowned at the stranger inserting himself into a conversation that wasn't his. "Why's that matter to you?" "Humor an old man," Mick said. "Earl," Dutch said slowly. "Earl Pruitt." Sal's rag stopped moving in his hands. "I remember an Earl," Mick said. Big shoulders, stood near the left side of the stage most of the day. Dutch's frown deepened into something more confused than defensive now.
"You weren't there!"
"I was there," Mick said. He reached up and took off the baseball cap. Let his hair fall the way it always did, gray streaked through what used to be unmistakable. He hadn't planned this. He never planned the days that mattered most. Dutch's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a second. Sal stood up from his stool slow, one hand on the workbench for balance, staring at the face he'd last seen from 20 feet away on a stage with red and black fabric whipping in the wind. "No way," Sal said, voice barely above a whisper. 10:10 a.m. The shop radio kept playing low in the corner, some unrelated song, the universe's indifferent soundtrack to a room that had just stopped breathing normally. "You said I owe you," Mick said to Dutch, calm, no defensiveness in his voice at all. "You're not wrong. I've thought about that debt for 50 years. I just never knew who to pay it to." Dutch's leather vest seemed heavier on him suddenly. "You're actually him." "I am." Sal walked around the counter, slow, like a man approaching something he wasn't sure was real yet. He stopped 3 feet away. His hands were shaking, the same hands that had spent 40 years rebuilding engines without a tremor. "You don't remember me," Sal said. "Why would you? There were 100 of us out there that day." "I remember the fear," Mick said. "I don't always remember the faces. I remember the fear in all of them." Sal nodded slow. "We were kids playing soldier. Nobody trained us for that crowd. Nobody trained anybody for that crowd." "No," Mick agreed. "Nobody trained any of us. Not the band, not your club, not the promoters who picked that speedway 4 days before the show because the first venue fell through." Dutch had gone quiet, watching the two old men talk like he was eavesdropping on something he'd accidentally walked into the middle of, which he had. "My uncle never forgave the band," Dutch said, quieter now, less rehearsed. "Said you all flew off in a helicopter and let the club take the fall in every paper, every book, every documentary for 50 years. Mick's eyes didn't move from Sal's face, but he answered Dutch. "Your uncle's right that it wasn't fair. The blame should have been shared. Promoters, band, your club, all of us made decisions that day that put people in danger." The story got simpler than the truth because simple stories sell better than complicated ones. That's not an excuse. It's just what happened to the memory of that day. Sal's voice cracked when he spoke again. "A man died at our feet, Mick. 20 feet from where I was standing. I've carried that for half my life, and so has every brother who was there that day." "I know," Mick said. "I've carried the not knowing exactly what happened from 4 feet away for the same 50 years. We're not so different, you and me. Just carrying it from different sides of the same stage." 11 p.m. that night, if anyone had been recording the moment, would have had to wait through 3 full seconds where nobody in that shop said a single word. 3 seconds. Then 5. Dutch's radio kept playing low, oblivious, the only sound left in the room. Sal reached out and put a hand on the counter to steady himself, The way you do when something true finally lands after waiting 50 years to be said out loud. Earl passed 2 years ago, Dutch said finally. Never got to hear you say any of that. Mick's face shifted, something quiet and sorry moving across it. I'm sorry I didn't get the chance to tell him while he could hear it. Tell me about him sometime. I'd like to know who he was beyond that one day. Dutch nodded, unable to find more words than that for the moment. Sal cleared his throat, trying to find his footing back in the ordinary world of motor oil and clutch cables. Your bike's almost done, he said, voice still rough. Clutch plate needed replacing. 20 minutes. Take your time, Mick said. I'm not in a hurry today. He sat back down on the stool, picked the magazine back up, but he didn't read it this time either. He just held it, the way you hold something familiar when the rest of the room has gone unfamiliar around you. Have you ever had to face someone you'd hurt without meaning to, decades after the fact? Tell me how that conversation went for you. I read every comment. Dutch lingered by the counter, not quite ready to leave, not quite sure what to do with the morning he was having. You really remember the fear, he said. Not the music, not the crowd cheering. The fear. The fear is what stays, Mick said. Everything else fades into highlight reels. Fear doesn't make highlight reels. It just makes men quiet for 50 years. Sal finished the clutch job in silence, hands moving on muscle memory, while his mind sat somewhere else entirely. When he wheeled the bike back out front, he didn't hand Mick a bill. On the house, Sal said. Mick shook his head. No, you did the work. Take the money. That's not the debt that needed paying today. Sal took the cash, folded it without counting it. The way men do when money isn't really the thing being exchanged. You should meet some of the old club, Sal said. Not for press, not for a documentary. Just men who were there. I think it'd do some of them good to hear what you said today. Mick thought about it for a moment, swinging his leg over the bike. I'd like that. No cameras. No story for anybody but the men in the room. Sal nodded, held out his hand. Mick shook it, the kind of handshake that carries 50 years of unsaid things in it, and somehow manages to set a fraction of that weight down. Dutch watched the bike pull away from the curb, engine running smooth now, clutch catching clean. He looked at his uncle's old patch on his vest, the one Earl had given him before he passed, and for the first time in years it felt like it was carrying something other than anger. 6 months later, a small gathering happened in the back room of that same shop. No press, no cameras, exactly as promised. A dozen old men who'd worked security at a racetrack in 1969 sat in folding chairs while a man in a worn denim jacket talked to them quietly for 2 hours about a day none of them had ever fully put down. Nobody ever posted about it online. Sal never mentioned it to customers. Dutch kept his uncle's patch on his vest, but he stopped telling the story like a grievance and started telling it like a memory, which is a different thing entirely, and a kinder one. Years later, in an interview nobody remembers the name of, Mick was asked if he'd ever made peace with Altamont. He said something simple, the way the truest things tend to come out. You don't get to rewrite the worst day. You only get to decide who you become on the other side of it. If this story moved you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one we uncover. Some debts don't get paid in money. They get paid in showing up, 50 years late, and finally telling the truth.